3, 2, 1. You are recording.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first official search and rescue podcast. I'm your host, Scott Robb, and with me today, I have the original podcast gangster and my good friend, Josh Hurguy, who is now, he was with the Gold Ranch Fire District the same time I was. And now he's with South Kitsap Fire and Rescue, and he's the administrative services chief over there. So, Josh, how the heck are you?
Good morning, Scott. I am doing fantastic. It's a classic Pacific Northwest type of day. A little gray, a little drizzly, but fantastic to not be in the desert.
Yes, I know that was a beef that you had back when you were living here, that the heat, you and the heat just weren't homies, right?
No, which is kind of a weird alignment, right? Lived there for 46 years, and I hate the heat so much, and there was just inevitably nothing you could do about it, you know. And when your pool is at 95 degrees, you just kind of take stock of life, right?
Right.
If I don't get along with the heat, it's time to make a change.
Yeah, and you actually you made a change right at that 20-year mark. So for those that aren't aware, at least the time period that we came in, you can start collecting your pension at 20 years. And you bridged that where you hit right at 20 years, you had this other gig. And I hated to see you go because you were my best friend and homie through all of the things that we grew up together. We actually went to the academy together and went through the ranks all together. And so watching you go was tough, but I was so excited for you because I wanted to see how your skill set could flourish in another organization. So tell me how that transition has worked for you so far.
Well, you know, first off, I like to think we're still best friends just because I don't live in Tucson anymore.
Oh,
so
that's true. That's true.
Maybe if I'm off base, we can talk about that later. But I'm just going to continue this under the premise that we are still best friends.
All right, that's fair.
So if you'll remember, you know, when we were going through that transition, it was an ideal time personally and professionally. Right. And you and I are both huge believers in needing to strike a harmony between our professional beings and our personal beings.
Right.
So, you know, in the personal side of my life, I had two girls, you know, Emma and Tessa, and Emma was finishing 8th grade and wasn't going to follow her middle school class to the high school that everybody was going to. She was going to go to a different spot. And Tessa's just kind of like a party animal, so she's always game for anything. And being an educator, you know, Erin was a middle school science teacher. Being an educator in Arizona, being an educator pretty much anywhere, a thankless, tough gig, you know. So in my home life, when the opportunity presented itself at South, was a great time personally if I was going to make a move, right? There wasn't a lot of those kind of ties that people tend to kind of keep them in one spot. Professionally, as you mentioned, you know, we're running up on that 20-year mark. So there was some financial security in taking a risk that I probably would not have considered or been able to. It gets really easy to fall into kind of that grind existence of a guaranteed paycheck versus chasing what makes you happy, you know. And I love the fire service, but I was in a rut at the ranch, you know. And it was so on when the opportunity presented itself with South, it was a great opportunity and timing in my professional life. It was a great timing and opportunity in my personal life. So jumped right in to see if I could snag it, and happily I was successful.
Right. You know, I had no doubt that whatever position you put in for, you would snag, because that's what you did all throughout your career. And we used to like to joke because we were coming up at the same time, and every single time there was a promotional process, I felt like I was guaranteed to get second, because everybody knew Josh was going to get first. And so like, I was just like, oh, I'm just going to vie for second place. Like, hey, you want somebody to come in second? I'm your guy. I'll be able to get in there. And, but that's what I've always admired about you, is the ability to tackle such big challenges and be able to stay focused and stay organized enough to present yourself in a way where you're always the best candidate. And you and I then took a road trip, if I remember correctly, to get all of your stuff up there over the course of 2 or 3 days of drive and get you all settled in. And that was a good time.
Yeah, that was me and you and Ginger on the road. U-Haul, broke old F-150, 2 guys in a dream, right?
Yeah.
Filing up the side.
Yeah, that was
me holding that U-Haul at a pretty solid 55 the entire time, and Scott getting to rev as much as he wanted, because you do need more bathroom breaks than me. So that helped out, I feel.
Yeah, that was the challenge. There's no way that I can drive more than an hour at a time without having to stop. So I would just drive as quickly as I could ahead of you, and it would buy me some time when I had to pull over the side of the road. There was a real tortoise and hare situation of getting up there to Washington, and the area that you're living at is amazing. It was cool to see the Pacific Northwest. I had never been there. So other than just obviously the life change and landscape change, what have you noticed as some differences in the firefighting community? Have there been a lot of similarities or differences, like once you replanted yourself into a new organization?
Well, first off, that was an adventure of a lifetime too. I had a great time on that trip. But when we talk about the fire service, right, and the differences and similarities between Washington and Arizona, and we could just use them as a state, right? Because
sure,
really, when you look at the agencies, it's how they're organized and funded, public or private, right? So, just looking at the differences between Washington and Arizona, the people still arrive into the profession with the same desires, right?
Right.
Majority of them just want to provide some sort of positive impact to their community. And you and I were hired at kind of a pivotal time in what the community asks of the fire service, right? We started our academy 2.5 months before September 11th, right? And it wasn't unusual for us to show up to a test. We both tested with the city of Tucson, and you totally beat me there because they never wanted to hire me. But we would show up to the TCC, right, with hundreds, if not thousands of people, and they would herd us all into the event center, right? And those were done in waves. There was your wave, and then there was 2 or 3 more behind that, right?
Yeah.
So a couple thousand people vying for what was probably about 20 spots in an academy. And even at the time, the agency that we both worked for, Golder, I remember that banquet hall at the Saddlebrook community center was just packed with people, right, for what was eventually 14 spots.
Right.
And then, post September 11th testing environment, all of a sudden there was federal funding available to state and local governments for emergency services, for fire and EMS, and for police, because our role had begun to expand with that, right? We started to, they were asking us to respond to anthrax incidents and natural disasters. And really the fire service became a one-stop shop for everything not needing a person to go to jail, right? We took everything else. So when that federal funding became available, agencies, like ours that were smaller and struggled to recruit based on income or call volume, were suddenly able to bring more people in and bring their staffing up to where they were. So there was a shift, and we saw it at Golder to where, if we were hiring an academy class of 10 to 15, we'd maybe get 200 applications. And then that's just kind of how the industry existed for about 15, 20-year period. And now what we're seeing is a shift back, I would say, more to recruitment numbers. So when we talk about the people, right, the people are still motivated intrinsically by the same thing, to provide a service to their community, to help out where they can, and do something meaningful. I would say the biggest difference that I've noticed moving up this way is in how the agencies are administered from the state level and from revenue collection.
Okay.
I will say the biggest thing I've noticed tactically is that we go on a lot of roofs up here, and we fight a lot of fires. We
don't do that in Arizona.
No, because of the lightweight construction with the concrete shingles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and a lot of our residents down there were single story with those big pitched roofs, or maybe 2 stories with their big pitched roofs. Here, it's unusual to see a Rambler style or single story house, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the majority of residential structures here, houses, are 2 stories, maybe with a daylight basement, but all pitched roof and asphalt shingle. And we fight a lot of fires up here, and we go on a lot of roofs. So tactically, that's probably the thing that stuck out to me the most.
Right. Did you freak out early on? Like the first time you cruised up and you're like, what's everybody doing on the roof?
I did. The first fire I rolled up here to, my first instinct was to just start screaming at everybody to get off the roof. Like, what are you doing up there? We don't do that anymore. Get off of the roof. And it was one of those conversations I had to have, like, why do we put so many people up there? And that, so tactically, that the firefighting work has been a bit in our past now, a bit in my past, right? But those are just, that was probably the thing that jumped out to me the most, was that they go on a lot of roofs, but, tactically very similar. The type of people that are drawn to the fire service and want to make a career out of it hasn't changed. Probably the biggest one, I would say, is just in the governance, in revenue generation. Washington State's a completely different animal from Arizona.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you a couple things about that. But first, as you're talking, you and I were drawn into the fire service for those same reasons that you're seeing kids come in nowadays. It was the opportunity to serve, the opportunity to have an adventure of a lifetime. I loved that every single day that I showed up to work was a different day, and you never really knew what was going to happen. And there was some excitement into that, and people that truly want to help other people find jobs like fire, police, and military. And I think what happened to both of us is because of our career was we rose through the ranks pretty fast, both at the same time. And I think it wasn't for a lack of enjoyment of the job, but it was our organization was small and the growth was exploding. We were getting a lot of residents, a lot of new buildings coming in, a lot of opportunities for promotion. And it was like the mentality of service started to evolve for us as well. Now I want to try this. Now I want to try hazmat. Now I want to try paramedic. Now I want to do special ops. Mm-hmm. Because all those opportunities were there. So was that the same thing that kind of drove you? Because you didn't neither of us stayed in the field as long as probably your standard career was. And it wasn't because we didn't like it. It was because there was too many other things to do as our organization was growing.
Well, I didn't start my career in this with the desire to be a firefighter, right? I was really attracted to the medical aspect. So I came into Golder after a couple of years in private ambulance as a paramedic, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason I got my fire certs was purely employability, right?
Right. Make yourself more
just
marketable.
So I could, exactly. But as I was going through that fire academy in Tubac, shout out to Tubac, what's up, guys? As I was doing that, I got really interested in it, and it's exactly like you said. This career offers so many opportunities, and for people like us that I think just possess a curiosity to see what else can I do? What else am I capable of? What else does this career offer me? It's those opportunities to really expand not only your knowledge base, but the impact you can have, right?
Right.
We got into this because we want, at the base of it, we want to be in service and we want to help people, right? And I always looked at these other opportunities as how can I help more people?
Right.
Right. As a paramedic firefighter, you got your patient and you're taking care of your patient, and that's really great, right? You're doing everything you can to help them out. And then our next promotional opportunity at the ranch was really as captain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now you're not just helping one person at a time. You are helping your whole first due area and the people that you're responsible to lead, right? So you're not just helping one person now, you're helping a bigger group of people. And then that next promotional opportunity is battalion chief, right? And now you're not just helping one first due area, you're helping 10 first due areas, right? And that's kind of how I always looked at those opportunities, be it a specialty skill such as technical rescue or hazardous materials or wildland firefighting or prevention or any of these other awesome routes that the fire service offers. It was always an opportunity to help more people. And that's how I have always viewed anything that's come my way. Will the decisions I make and the actions I take provide an ability to help more people? If the answer to that is yes, then I'm all in.
Yeah. And that, I think what happened to me is I followed that same mentality, and you see, like, you're in a fire station and you're like, okay, I got 6 to 8 guys or gals underneath my little sphere of influence. And that's great. But then you're like, if I was a battalion chief, there'd be more under the sphere of influence. And if you're taking care of your people, and what I really started to enjoy was leading the leaders, right? Like, as a battalion chief, really setting our captains up for success with a culture and how you want to treat people and take care of people, so that you know that everybody's good, right? And everybody's can communicate. And something that happened to me that doesn't seem like it happened to you is I felt like I promoted to a point where I was no longer effective. And it was kind of weird because now I'm assistant chief of operations, and you're like, whoa, you're in charge of the whole entire operation. Like, you finally have it. But I was going to meetings nonstop. And I was dealing with, like, what I figured was like dealing with first world problems all day, whether it's committee stuff or just stuff where I was like, I think the best way to say it is you want to take an extrovert and make him ineffective, put him in an office. And that's what happened to me. Exactly. Dude, and that's why in leaping for me and saying I still want to lead leaders and help people, it was like I had to get out of that office. And this is where I leapt into is let's influence and reach more people, but do it in a way that I can actually communicate with them. And I'm not bogged down with paperwork and politics and some of the other things that you get stuck in. So how have you been able to navigate that and still feel effective on a daily basis?
Well, I think what made us a great team, right, is that we're very similar in our drives, but we're very different in our approaches, mm-hmm. right? Because, you and I had a lot of in-depth talks about me not being in the office, right? Mm-hmm. I'm a very logical, analytical thinker, right? I like math. I like lines. I like things that march out and that you can plan. You were always able to connect with people on a very personal and individual level. And our two personalities, I think, is what made us a really great team, right? You kept me in check on me getting out and talking to people. I kept you in check on, hey, maybe we should do some math on this before we launched this harebrained scheme that you've come up with, right? And And we were really good at keeping ourselves in line. And when you talk about how you felt when you promoted into that spot, right? We had already noticed kind of that going on between the two of us, right? Because you were able to get me out of my kind of self-contained world that honestly led to me making some pretty big mistakes, right? And then allowed me to expand my worldview. But we'd already kind of started to take some of those steps. We launched the YouTube channel. We launched the podcast, right?
Right.
So I can look back at your career and your trajectory and see that you were trying to take some of those steps and to be able to continue to at least have that presence and make that effort. And you and I had some pretty solid leadership wins. I mean, let's look at Fred and Chris, right?
Yeah.
And
awesome dudes.
Skip and the dentist, right? And those dudes we brought in from we met them as brand new firefighters, and they went on to achieve great things. And I would like to think that maybe you and I had just a little bit to do with that. So really how I stay engaged now is in a lot of those lessons that I learned from you, right? And the takeaways we had and some of my ideas that maybe didn't go so well. If I'm just by myself and I'm trying to solve a problem, chances are I'm trying to solve my problem and not what's actually going on the street, right? And I think the ALS BLS refresher fiasco that I came up with is a great example of that, right? And so when I notice in myself now when I'm spending too much time in my own world, right, that I need to get out and I need to see people, and how I've kind of maintained that since I don't have the same outlets that I had when you and I were a Golder together, is, there's the classic management by walking around, and I can't think of a better name, but that's really what it is. I notice after a period of time, I will have been by myself too long, and it just takes that initial step of just getting out of the office and getting into fire stations and people's work environments, and not just connecting with them on their job, but who they are as people, right?
Right.
A lot of times, what we notice, particularly in public safety, is people define who they are as people by their job title, right?
Mm-hmm. They self-identify, right, with whatever their work is or their current situation.
Exactly. And you kind of lose who you are as a person. So just connecting with people is talking about their families, talking about their kids. What do you got going on this weekend? It's a very intentional act that I take for myself because I don't want to fall back into those habits that you spent probably a solid 16 years trying to beat out of me.
Well, the cool thing though is like you've got this great personality that a lot of people don't get to see, and I think for people that are listening that are chief officers, or as you get into that executive role, and a lot of what you have to deal with is the problem children. We would call them the hateful eight. In any organization of 100 or so people, you got 8 terrorists inside there, and you typically spend a lot of time having to deal with their shenanigans and discipline. And just through the nature of that job, you develop a reputation that's more of like, oh, he's the henchman, or he's just out to get people. And that really isn't the case, because you're just trying to do a job, and you're trying, like we used to say, my loyalty is to Rome itself. Rome is our fire district, the people that we serve and the people that serve them. And so 1 or 2 knuckleheads, while you may have some extenuating circumstances that caused you to do this stupid act, it's still stupid, and you need to be taken care of, because our job is to protect Rome. And with that comes a little bit of a henchman, or a little bit of an intimidation. And you're already a super tall, kind of intimidating dude. So I wanted to see people see the Josh that I knew, and the Josh that would hang out at barbecues and go to concerts and has such a great personality. And that's just why I wanted you out to the people more, so they could actually see you in a non-disciplinary situation.
Well, and we had some pretty rough ones that you and I had to deal with, but you hear it in a lot of different settings, and you and I definitely had conversations about it, right? Leadership is hard, and it can be lonely at times. I can't remember who said it, but one of the things that's always stuck with me is, we judge ourselves by our intentions, and we judge other people by their actions, right? And that's, I think, something that gets applied to people in leadership positions, especially when the decision we make doesn't go 100% perfectly out of the gate. We intended to do something fantastic, right? It just didn't happen for whatever reason, for any variety of reasons, right? But it's those kind of those lessons that I picked up from you on allowing people to know me as a person, right? I very much saw my role when we started to promote it, particularly into the chief ranks, right? How I always saw those positions of, okay, I don't actually talk to you, right? There are a couple of people between me and you, and I don't talk to you, right? And so I thought that was what that position was supposed to be, and that was a mistake I made very early on, which also kind of lends itself
to chain,
my...
man. Respect the chain.
Exactly. And when you have a perception like that naturally falls into how, someone like me who's like, I'm good being by myself, it just creates kind of a barrier that people can't break through. I can't break through one way, and people can't break through the other way. And it was tearing that down for myself. You helped me realize that. I think it's helped me not just be more successful, but really help. I love developing people, right? That was something that we always enjoyed doing. I love training the person to come take my job for me, right? At the end of the day, if I got somebody that's nipping at my heels, right, either it's time for me to go, it's time for me to improve, but at the end of the day, I've done a great job, because now I got somebody that can step in and just keep running and do even better things, right?
Right.
And I really enjoy that. And I didn't have that when I kind of, that fell by the wayside when I took that step into that battalion chief role, because I had that perception based on what I thought the position would be. And over time, and a lot of help from my friends, right, I was able to shed that. And I think that's really helped my transition here to South.
Well, that's, I think what goes overlooked sometimes is when we're super critical of ourselves or how we could improve. And you've talked about some of those things of like me trying to get you out of your comfort zone. But one of the things that you've always had that's been unique that not a lot of fire service leaders have is that intellectual curiosity. And then beyond that, how to take that curiosity to solve a problem and then actually see it through from start to finish. And if I remember correctly, you had mentioned the taxation and the funding for fire departments being different with Washington and Arizona. And you recently had a pretty good win taking that intellectual curiosity and turning it into some revenue for your organization. I'd like to have you talk about that a little bit.
I'd love to, because it's one of my favorite topics going right now, actually. So earlier we talked about the difference in the kind of governance and taxing structures between Arizona and Washington, right? So South Kitsap Fire and Rescue is a fire district, just like Golden Ranch was a fire district, and they're both governed by elected officials from the community, right? In Arizona, the mill rate, the property tax rate, was set by the commissioners. There was a state cap, right? And the commissioners could approve up to that, right?
Right.
In Washington, right? We still have an elected group of board of commissioners, but it's the voters who set the mill rate and the property tax rate for the fire district. And it's done by a majority election. And that election lasts for the results of that if it's successful, lasts for 6 years. So every 6 years, fire districts in the state of Washington engage their voters in a levy campaign to bring it back up, essentially request that mill rate on their property tax to fund the activities of the fire district. So, in my professional sphere, I went from educating the governing board. This is what, at my time in that role, operations, this is what I need to make operations work. And it became the political will of the governing board, who, if they wanted to be reelected or didn't want to be reelected, right, to make a decision on what they're going to set the mill rate. Here in Washington, it's trying to educate the voters on why we need this mill rate, right? Why we need to levy this amount on your property taxes to provide service.
Right, because it goes to a general vote of all the district residents, much like it would for a bond for something that we had in Arizona. But year to year, that doesn't happen. The fire district officials in Arizona, they just kind of set the rate, and they either get scrutinized or not, but they have the power to do that. And this has to be overridden by a vote. So you had a big project in order to get this increased levy, right?
Correct. And so where we're at kind of in the evolution of South is we are a rapidly expanding population. To put it into context, it's a lot like when we joined Golder in 2001, where people were starting to leave the metropolitan area of Tucson for cheap land and less expensive housing and move up that Oracle corridor, right? We're noticing a migration here from Seattle, where property values were really high. People were able to sell their super cool downtown condo for a 17-minute ferry ride across the Puget Sound over here to South Kitsap and take that cash and put it into a much bigger property on land. So we see a lot of growth. Our call volume has gone up 60% in the last 10 years. Every year we're on a 6% year-over-year growth. But the size of the workforce hadn't changed. So when we were going into our 2022 levy, we needed that mill rate to come back up to the maximum so we could hire more people and provide better service. Our workforce was just getting ground into the ground. They were getting run down. They're overworked, right? So what ended up happening is we failed that levy election in 2022. Luckily, we had run it a year early. We ran it in year 5 versus year 6 of that levy cycle. So we still knew we had another year to get it passed, and that was the project that kind of landed at my doorstep December 1st of 2022, just about a month after that failed election, And so that was really my first opportunity since coming to South to take on a big project that, one, I didn't have a lot of knowledge on because it's totally new system from Arizona, right? And to have the opportunity to learn how to do that and learn this community in a very short period of time in a very high stakes situation, right? Because if it didn't pass in 23, we were facing having to lay people off, right? So we already had a workforce that was responding to too many calls, and we were still going to have to serve the community with fewer people on the street if we didn't pass that levy in 23.
Well, yeah. And I would imagine that conditions like that make for your organization to have been a stepping stone onto other more stable and secure organizations. So there's also the attrition factor, I'd imagine.
Well, and that's one of the things I found really cool about this workforce, right? Is the people here largely come here and stay here. We've had by the ones and twos go seek life at Seattle or South King or some of these bigger agencies.
Not Tacoma.
not Tacoma because while their show is funny, I don't know. Just the workforce here is very committed to the agency and the community. So to face the prospect of having to tell, this workforce that we're gonna have to lay some of you off, was really daunting. And we definitely didn't want to do that, but in the meantime, the agency itself is still having to hire as much as we can with the budget funds we have available, because we still have this looming call volume issue, right? And how do the challenge was how to connect with the community really so they understood it, right? But it's not just here. I think there's a lot of communities in the country that are just, tired of taxing, right? They're fatigued,
Well, yeah, and everything's kind of went up with inflation and groceries, and people just don't want to continue to shell out more. Like my anger of having the option to have to tip because I walked to a cash register and ordered my own food that I will then pick up myself, and I have to have the option to tip an extra 15% for no reason. Like that, there's fatigue that goes into having to shell out more and more and more.
Exactly, and it's you're hit with it from a bunch of different angles, right? And when you look at the community of South Kitsap, we have a lot of lagging economic indicators here. Our number of people living below the poverty line is greater than that of the state average, right? Our median income is lower than the state average. The number of people with after high school education, so bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, is less than the state average and way behind the national average, right? And when you look at our voting population in terms of supporting tax measures, right? With the exception of the fire district, which historically had done well since about 2012, there's a fatigue to it, and they're tired of being asked to do more when they're having to shell out more just to live their everyday lives, right? And the majority of people aren't ever going to need our service. Right.
Exactly.
So South Kitsap Fire and Rescue, we serve about 80,000 people. And last year we ran just north of 13,000 calls, right? So right there's a disparity. Not everybody's going to need your service, use your service, or even see you do that service.
Yeah, and a lot of those callers they're multiple callers, right? Because they're towards later stage or end stage, and they really need your services. So they might get 3 or 4 runs out of you, whereas nobody else will call for 7 years, but they're expected to pay more and more. So trying to get that. So how do you corral all of these moving parts, including like unions and all of it to win a successful levy election like you did?
Well, so the first thing we really had to do was kind of start with how did this not pass, right? We hadn't had a levy election fail in that point in over a decade, right? And I actually think it was 2004 was the last one that didn't pass, but I could be wrong on that. But it'd been a long time, right? So, and really, I think what a lot of agencies fall into is they get all their leadership in a room, right? And that'll be the leadership of the organization, the union leadership, right? And they'll sit down and go, okay, why didn't this pass? And they'll shoot it around in there, and then they'll come up with a game plan, right? What we did was we took the fire chief right as we rolled into 2023, and I said, okay, I'm going to put you in the community, not in our fire stations. We're going to go to where our community is. Our communities in the libraries, our communities in restaurants, our communities in all these different locations. And I'm going to ask you to just sit there and take it for an hour, hour and a half, right? And so that's what we did for 6 weeks through February and March of 2023. Every Wednesday, three different settings a day. We had them out there and we listened. We listened to what the community said, and it was all these topics, right? It's costing us more to live. I don't use your service. It always seems like we're asking for more, but we don't see a tangible result to that, right? And so essentially we took that input and we sat back down with our union leadership and members of our organization and line staff, admin staff, fleet and facilities, right? Like, here's what the community is saying. Here's our need. How do we tailor that message in a way they will understand, right? Not that makes sense to us. You and I can talk about effective firefighting force, right? And NFPA 1710 and how quickly we need to have 15 firefighters on the scene of a first alarm residential structure fire, right?
Right.
But even me just saying those words in this podcast, right, and talking to you about it, it does not resonate with the guy who stopped to get a cup of coffee and is now being asked to tip 15-20% on something he just bought, right? When maybe his job doesn't, or their job doesn't have that kind of option to it, right? They go and so what we were able to do was take that input from the community and take all of those injects and essentially write a 2-sentence paragraph that everybody was able to repeat, right? And that was kind of the second step of how do we take this input from the community, put it into a format that's easily relatable in a way that they're going to understand and is meaningful to them, that everybody can repeat at the drop of a hat. You're asking us for this levy. Why do you need it? Right? It was right there and ready to go. And everybody knew what it was. And I think the next pitfall that some agencies make is, okay, we've done that, so we're good. So by that point for us, it was the first week of April and the election was in August, right? And so I think that's the next step where agencies may fail, is like, all right, we got this and we're set. We're totally going to win this, right? But there's a gap of time that if you're not continuing to engage, right, people are going to forget about you, right? Because 80,000 people, 13,000 calls, 67,000 people are never going to hear from you. So it became a sustained effort, right? In our community here, we have a Saturday farmers market. So we were down there every single Saturday. Booth set up, big banner with our name on it, hats and fire helmets and badges for the kids, some community education lessons, right? So there was a sustained communication point, always with that developed message of this is why we need it, right? And not shying away from difficult conversations from people who came up to us and said, I disagree with you and here's why. I think there's a tendency to for people to recoil from confrontation. And when you do that, you're not educating anybody, right? You and I and other fire service professionals listening to this know that, from a government standpoint, everything we say has to be able to be verified in some form or fashion, right? Like, we just can't go out and say, well, if you pass this levy, Hawaiian Punch is going to come out of your faucet and your life is going to be great, right? We have to say
the other extremes too, that we would hear people say, like, they stand up on the podium and say, if this doesn't pass, we're going to be laying people off. And it's like, well, that's really not what you should be saying or doing as a leader. You should be educating and warning them of potential challenges that will come from something not passing. But to go to extremes to try to get a reaction, that's that old school, let me get you to vote based on fear. And that does not sound like at all what you guys are doing. You were basically a campaign manager helping set the fire chief up in these scenarios of educating.
Exactly. And that's the other side of it, right? There's either too rosy a projection or there's that fear-based response, right? If this doesn't pass, people are going to die,
Mm-hmm.
right? Our response times get longer. Your house is
Babies.
going to
Usually
burn
it's
down
babies
around
that are
you.
going to die.
Yeah, it's this terrible outcome, right?
Right.
And I react very viscerally to that. When somebody comes at me from a fear-based place, I automatically go against it. And I didn't want us to go that route. There was that fine line of education when people asked, well, what if this doesn't pass? Well, realistically, we will have to close a fire station, right? We just can't sustain the number of people with the amount of revenue that's generated, right?
Yeah, but you're giving
So it
them
was,
actual math as to the reason
yes,
why that station would have to close, not riling them up.
exactly. And being able to and being willing to participate in those difficult conversations without going in the fear route, I think had a resonating impact with our community, with that population that's fatigued, right, from more hands and more requests. Now, do I think that changed a lot of people's minds? I don't know. I don't know how many of them left that interaction initially being against us and we're like, all right, now I'm going to support this, right? What I do know is that because I was out at those every weekend except for a couple of them, right? Every one of those interactions I had, if there was 100 of them, I can only recall maybe a handful that still left just as angry as they showed up, right?
Right.
There was a majority of the time there was a mutual respect and genuine thanking for the information, right? And what I do know is that we didn't pass it in 22 and we did pass it less than a year later, right? We were able to flip that vote over, right? And it was a combination of a work by a lot of people, right? By our line staff, by our admin staff, by definitely the fire chief. In between May 1st and August 1st, I think was the election this year. I'm looking at the wrong calendar. I'm trying to work backwards. He was at over 100 events in the community, right?
Awesome.
Just out there, just talking, right? Listening more than talking, providing education, providing the facts, because on the no side of that equation, right? That group is essentially able to say whatever they want, right? Because they don't have that responsibility. They don't have that legal requirement to only report facts as facts, right?
Right.
So everybody here and there was a core group of about 20, but it was really the agency as a whole that was able to come together and be able to communicate this message to our community in such a fashion that the community supported us, right? And so that campaign didn't end with that successful election, right? Since then, we've been continuing to educate the community. Okay, you approved us for this, right? You let us raise your taxes, right? We told you with that we were going to hire at least 21 new firefighters, right? So we continually tell the public, here's your new group of firefighters, right? They are at this stage in their process. They're leaving for the academy. Here they are at the academy. They are back now. They are out, responding to you and your needs, right? And so what I think the big kind of shift that I hope I had a positive impact on here was historically elections were looked at in the window of the election, right? Okay, we need to run this election, so let's start right now and get ready for it. And here we'll get the outcome, right? Where I like to think I had a positive impact on South, and this one was, we need to look at elections outside of just that window, right? It's always got to be ongoing for us.
Right.
We can't just be in the public in a non-emergency setting, right? When we need something, we need to continually be out there.
Exactly.
We need to be at the schools. You and I, how many crews did we send to JV and varsity football games at the ranch, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They were there all the time, right?
And you have a consistent billboard that's advertising your organization while being out there and actually being ready to help if somebody gets injured on the football field, and you're in the community. And what I liked about that is we had 3 major high schools, and each fire station kind of had adopted an individual high school in there, where it was like that was their team, and that was and vice versa. This station was for this high school, and you just get integrated that way in a non-emergency setting, and you show kids the fire truck, and you're influencing high school students as to like, man, that's cool. Look at those guys. They're all in shape, and they're hanging out, and they're enjoying the football game, and everybody loves them and wants to be around them. That's what I want to be. When they're searching for careers, it's nothing but value add. And for the 2 hours they have to get out of the station and do that, it does so much benefit for the community and the organization that it's worth it.
Well, I always looked at it very similar to what you did for me, right? You encouraged me to let people get to know me as an individual and as a person, right? I wasn't just a person with a name in an office, right? People got to know who I was as Josh, and it's the same thing with the firefighters, right? They get to know them as people, right? They get to know them as humans, not just this group of people hanging out in this building. And if I ever need them, they're going to come, right? But now they're getting to know them, right? And they see them being part of the same environment they're in, and that's a really powerful connection for people, right? It's not this mystery force that's going to come out only when I call them, right?
Right.
And it's adding that human element, especially in a community that's like South Kitsap, right? That a lot of our workforce grew up here, went to South Kitsap High School, still live in this community, and being able to highlight that connection and just to have that interaction outside of when you wrecked your car or when you took a tumble down the stairs, or God forbid, one of your family members is having a life-threatening event is important, right? It's hugely important that we interact with our community outside of that setting. And that's where I like to think I hope I've had a positive impact on South, is as the agency, right, is not just approaching these needs in the time frame with which we need it, but as a continuous part of our everyday operation is we have to be out there and we have to engage. So we've continued all of those efforts, right? We're switching it up in how we deliver it, right? So our farmers markets this year won't be so much as levy education, but here's how to create a defensible space around your house. Up here we have a big wildland urban interface issue. We have a lot of forest abutting houses. So here's how you create a defensible space. One Saturday will be hands-only CPR. Another one will be smoke detectors. We're switching it to an engagement thing, but still always being out there, always having the helmets and the badges for the kids, because who doesn't love a helmet and a badge, right?
That's
but
awesome, dude.
Just maintaining that connection is where I like to think that if I had a positive impact outside of that election that's long term, I like to think that that's it.
Yeah, well, and you know what I'd like to see then from you, if I'm continuing to challenge and push you, one thing that I could really use help with is what I want search and rescue to be is like, if you think of it as this alternative learning platform, what you've been talking about in the past 45 minutes or so is it's such a unique skill set that not everybody gets exposed to. So what I would love for you to do, especially because you love giving back and developing people, is to do a workshop for our people, aspiring firefighters that need to understand how some of this tax levy stuff works. And what's cool is you can do it specific to Arizona or Washington, but I want to provide real education and mentorship, because right now there's so many organizations that are stuck in this archaic system that, well, somebody left a voicemail. Awesome. Now, there's organizations that are stuck in this archaic system of go get your internet college degree and go pay 20 grand for it and let ChatGPT write all of your papers. And then when you come back, you'll be ready to be a chief officer. And so it's a dead in the water system. And what I'm trying to do is build a new system. So through Search and Rescue, I would love to have you do a workshop, whether it's finance, whether it's all of these little niche things that you've just accumulated knowledge over the years. So I hate to put you on the spot, but I figured if I can get Josh to do a workshop, people are going to attend it, because it's just stuff you don't know until you truly get mentored and exposed to it.
Well, I not only would I love to, I think it's a great idea, and that's one of the things I forgot to kind of touch on when I was talking about that levy election. The 18-year-old kid coming into the fire service, right? Like we discussed, they want to help. They, at 18, they probably think it's a super cool job too, and it genuinely is, right? It's
right.
It's been a great career. But what does the 18 to 20-year-old kid sitting on a fire truck, living out the backdraft ladder 49 dream, know or care about how the tax levy influences them directly? Right? Why is it just as important as it was for us to educate the community on why it was important? We had to really spend a lot of time educating our workforce, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is how this impacts you as an individual and you as a professional in the fire service. And that's one of the key education points that rallied our internal population into really getting on board with this. You would think it's a no-brainer, right? That everybody who works for South Kitsap Fire and Rescue, every firefighter, regardless of where they're at, whether they're in a municipality or a fire district or a private agency, right? Under the connection between, we want our agency to be successful, so yeah, fund this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think they miss that connective tissue, that if it's where that comes from, why it comes that way, the impact to the individual property owner, and how their support is so important for you to be able to live your dream of giving back to the community, how they're intertwined. And without that mutual support and respect, one can't exist without the other.
Right.
One of the favorite questions you and I used to like to ask our new recruits was, who needs who more? Do we need the public more, or does the public need us more? Right. And there's no perfect answer to that, but it's designed, it's intended to highlight that connection of that very important symbiotic relationship that has to be there. So if you're interested in doing that, I'm 100% on board.
Yes, and what we're going to start doing is really a series of workshops in different little niches. Everybody has their own skill set, and like I can teach a lot of things well, and we know tactical fire officers can teach some things really well, and it's connecting those subject matter experts with just small workshop stuff. It doesn't have to be over the course of a semester where you write a bunch of fake papers. It can be, let's talk for 4 hours, and get you ready to be a better provider, whether it's tactical, whether it's leadership, whether it's administrative, all of those things. So I'm going to have you stamped, and we'll talk offline about getting some of those workshops together. But one thing that I want to end every segment with is with story time, because firefighters love stories and people love hearing firefighter stories. And one of the things that you brought up that I'd like you to expand on is you've talked about some different things that people that we've mentored over the years, and you mentioned a guy named the dentist. Do you remember how the Adam Gerald, Chief Adam Gerald now, how did he get that nickname?
Well, that's right. Chief Adam Gerald. What a great accomplishment for him. So Adam showed up to our agency from Mount Lebanon Fire, and we had a group of paramedic students going through class. And Adam was always a fantastic medic, and a little bit on the cocky side, but was always able to back it up. And if I remember correctly, we had our group of medic students, one of whom I believe, it was my future brother-in-law. Adam had the innovation mannequin out on the kitchen table at the old 110 there, and the students were practicing innovation, and the dentist rolls up and says, "Let me show you kids how this is done," drops that laryngoscope in there, and the first thing you hear is the teeth on the mannequin click. And Brian Loftus looked at him and go, "There you go, dentist. Way to bust out their teeth."
That's right, because if you're using the top of the mouth and the teeth as leverage to try to get a good look in that intubation, then you're going to bust some teeth. And so that's why those mannequins click, right? It's so you can hear that and avoid dental surgery after your intubation.
And it stuck. So I don't know how many people still call him that.
I don't know.
I still call him that.
Yeah, it was just what Adam was known as, the dentist, and people get those nicknames. It's always something like weird or small or something that like so random, and then it sticks forever. So anybody that ever runs into Chief Gerald, he's the dentist, and that's why he loves a good. Go ahead.
And if he hears it, he'll respond to it, and that's his contact in my phone.
And that's when you know a nickname has stuck, because there have been some terrible nicknames that we've given people over the years, and then it's like we felt bad because we're like, oh man, the dude actually turns around and responds to that nickname now, and that's just sad for everyone. So they're like, I can't call him that anymore because I was just responding to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, dude, it's been great to have you. I really appreciate hearing your voice and getting to reconnect with you on this new leadership endeavor where you're going to play an intricate role. And I think the more people that are as engaged in their job as you are that come help us out and share their experiences in the form of podcasts and workshops, and the better we're going to make our industry, because you're not going to create better leaders and firefighters by going to internet college and having the chatbots write all your papers. So we're trying to give real education, and it will be pennies on the dollar compared to what people are shelling out for degrees these days, and the goal being to truly help and mentor people. So yeah. And the studio's fired up about it. See, the people need it. So Josh,
I like it.
Dude, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate being able to talk to you. I hope we have you on again in the near future, and can't wait to talk again, man.
Well, thanks for having me, and I'm really proud of you and these next steps that you're taking, especially going into what you pursuing the life and what you love to do, which is educate, slightly entertain at times, maybe, most definitely, but always from a good place of wanting people to know more, to learn more, to be more comfortable with themselves and push themselves to experience new things. So this is fantastic. Thanks for having me, and would love to do anything like this again. Just you need to give a shout. It's been great talking to you.
Awesome, dude. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you to Josh Hurguy, Deputy Chief Administrative Services for South Kitsap Fire and Rescue, and we will talk to you on the next podcast. Thanks, everybody.